This is a song that's been used by many subcultures. It's a folk song. Many agendas have been spirited forward by this song. And we think it's a good song, and we're going to play it for you now.
Hey Internet, welcome to Worldview Everlasting, the YouTube video podcast that spent so many nights just thinking how life had done it wrong, but it grew strong. It learned how to carry on. Okay? And yeah, no, I'm not exactly a Dallas Mavericks fan, partially because their owner, Mark Cuban's kind of a jerk, but you know what? That white guy, that gangly looking kind of weird white guy, that guy is nothing less than a basketball savant. Dirk Nowitzki by name. And ever since I saw him, not quite single-handedly, but, you know, nigh on, carrying his team on his back, put down my Portland Trailblazers in the first round of the NBA playoffs, I've been keeping an eye on this team because I thought, man, they look good. And what do you know? Up 3-2 over the Heat, going back to Miami for Game 6. All because of some lanky, funny-looking German white guy with long hair who nobody, and I mean nobody, can stop from scoring that basketball. Unbelievable. Inconceivable. Alright, but that's not what we do here on Fridays normally, you know, basketball in review. No, it's... email. And we got some good questions on the docket, so we're gonna jump right in. Yeah! D writes, I am wondering if I can get your perspective on young men considering entering seminary and ministry. Yes, probably, although it's kind of a narrow topic, so it doesn't necessarily apply to all, but it does, in a sense, apply to all. The theology of who should stand in the office of the holy ministry is something that all Christians should know. I'm a 24-year-old LCMS member and feel called into ministry. I'll stop right there. What do you mean? St. Paul writes in 1 Timothy chapter 2 that if one desires the office of an overseer, one desires a noble task. That's great. So if somebody wants to be a pastor, St. Paul says this is a good thing. But be careful with that word feel, which tends to dominate not only American culture, but is the root and center of mysticism, that is trying to find God through your emotions. Because there really is no place in the Bible, not a single place, where God tells anybody that they will know they should go into ministry because of how they feel. God doesn't speak to you through your feelings. If you desire a noble task, that's great. God's put that there, sure, but it's not His promise and proof. There's many people who feel called to ministry, but who are not called to ministry. When God calls people to ministry, He does it with words. In the New Testament era, that means now through testing and examination of those who present themselves because they have a desire to enter the office. And yeah, men only. And yeah, that's a big topic. And yeah, it's actually like more pro-feminine than most of the hyper-feminist agenda, which is all pro-masculine. And yeah, really. Ding. But hey, I feel called into ministry, but I am getting married soon, and I often wonder if my wife and I will be able to financially afford to make it through seminary. The answer is probably not. Although, then again, you might make it. I mean, everybody does. It's just, not gonna lie to you, it's a burden. It's a tremendous, tremendous burden, and our situation and economy's made it even worse. And the fact that once you get out, you're gonna get paid peanuts. I mean, guaranteed, you're gonna get paid peanuts. You are hardcore. I mean, you're giving up your life. You are throwing away your life for the church. It's a glorious and noble task. There's nothing like it on earth. Just beware, you really are losing your life. Yeah. If you know that going in, I mean, yeah. Rock on. But this is so huge because there is almost nothing more important to whether or not you are qualified to stand in the office of overseer in the Christian church as whether or not your wife is on the same page as you. Because if she's not, I guarantee you it will crash and burn and you are in for no end to the amount of suffering, frustration, disgruntledness, fighting, and pain. Both of you. Not only should you be lined up theologically, for you are, as her husband, tasked with washing her with water and the word so that you walk together in the same faith and the same confession, but she needs to really just kind of see that this desire to be in the office of an overseer is something she's going to support and say, I got your back no matter what. If we're starving in Nigeria getting shot at by rebels because that's where you were sent as a missionary, rock on. I'm with you. Let's do it. If she's anything less than that, I mean, even if it's like 85% like, yeah, sure, I guess we could try it out. Really, I mean, just wait, get a job, get a trade skill, start making money that way somehow and preparing for life, and you can always go to seminary. I mean, really, anytime. There were guys in my class that were in their 70s. It's all right. They're going to do better. They got an income. And the fact that you're concerned about fiscal things means that in some ways you are at this point double-minded. Now that's not a condemnation per se, so much as a warning. You can't go into this thing afraid of not having a wealthy enough lifestyle to tickle all the needs of your flesh. If you are, man, you're going to get bruised, and bruised hard. You're setting yourself up to be the enemy of the devil, and he's going to attack you the rest of your life. He's going to go at you like nobody's business, and there's nowhere that he can get at you more than through your belly. I do not want to let money to be a factor that dissuades me, but I cannot help being afraid of making the wrong decision for my family. If you have any thoughts, I would appreciate hearing them. Now, certainly to some extent, that's a justifiable fear, and it's a good one. You should not go into this thing on a whim saying, well, faith will get me through it. No, you need to plan. We Christians still live in this world even though we're not of it, and we must live by its laws and rules, and that includes financially as well. So it's a couple of huge questions. What kind of debt are you already carrying? Because if you got credit card debt or a house payment you haven't finished making, you're in big trouble. Unless you can sell the house, I suppose. If you just have student loans, I mean, you can kind of push that through, but recognize you come through and you're done with $70,000 in student loans and you're making $35,000 or less dollars a year, and you got to live on that. And I guess if your wife can get some work too, like that could help things. But then again, if she went to school to get a job, then she's got student loans too, and she may not be able to get a job where you want to be. And then if you want to have kids and never stay home at all, yeah, it's tough. It's a struggle. Now, I can confess that we've gone through it and we've managed pretty darn well. The Lord's been with us, but we have certainly gone into it with eyes open, planning the entire way. And I can't really say much more than that. You got to plan this thing out. You got to look at other options. You got St. Louis Seminary, which is big and gorgeous and beautiful, but it costs more to live in St. Louis than in Fort Wayne, and it costs more to live in Fort Wayne than it does to go to St. Catherine's, the Canadian seminary, which you can do and still be an LCMS pastor. You know, those kind of things you got to take into account. I don't want to belabor this point too much, but my advice to you, based on just kind of the emotive struggle you've confessed, is don't go this year. And this is advice I would give to anybody who's going to seminary. Before you go to seminary, get another degree of some kind, preferably a technical degree in a trade skill. So just in case you reach that point where your congregation can no longer afford to pay you, or where you take a stand for the truth and you get stabbed in the back by the synod that's supposed to protect you because you're only teaching what they believe. It happens. If that happens, that you have a skill you can fall back on and get work and continue to put food on the table for your family. St. Paul made tents. He did it by his own free will, and he did it so that he could continue to preach the gospel free of charge. Might be a good idea to be prepared for that if this is a concern you have going in. Yeah? Yeah. All right. So, super points. Plan ahead. Make sure your wife's on the same page as you. Try not to go, and if you can't not go, then go. Yeah. Hope that helps. Now, a little more difficult one. This was left in a YouTube comment. Can't remember which video it was, but responding to some of the claims about Christianity. The question's kind of awkward and maybe not phrased entirely well. The worldview is very different than mine per se, and so I'm going to put it right here and let you kind of look at it as I read it and talk about it, because I want to make sure we kind of really give it full credence and try to understand what the question's asking and some of the assumptions behind the question that would maybe need to be answered before you'd even ask the question. Yeah? Why would God give man free will to supposedly learn and grow infinitely? Why would he then decide to judge man after this short earth life? Seems to be no need to do that. Why judge an infant and send most to eternal damnation when we are just learning what is happening? Would it not make more sense to, when a person passes, I think that means dies, keep the process of learning and growth going into the spirit world? Thanks, R. Now, I'm really trying to take this question seriously. Not trying to mock you or anything, but you have some serious worldview assumptions that have led you to question other things that I said about needing to have Jesus be the Savior, the way, the truth, and the life. And you're never going to understand why I'm saying that unless you first let me question some of those assumptions. For example, first and foremost, this part, would it not make more sense? Now, I'm all for things making sense, and Christianity makes a lot of sense, but the sad reality of reality is that not everything in life does make sense. And if you're going to judge what you see happening based on whether or not it makes sense to you, like you're going to say it's not true because it doesn't make sense, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. I mean, does it make sense to stop at a red light? Why red? I mean, that doesn't make sense. I guarantee you, if you just went and changed the color to, green on top, half the people would still go through and you'd have a car wreck. So even though it doesn't make sense in this eternal, idealistic, forever truth logic way, you can't judge everything just by whether or not it makes sense to you at first glance. And so if you find that reality and truth is saying one thing and it doesn't make sense to you, a wise reaction is not to just kind of reject it and look for new answers, but instead to try to learn what does make sense about what you don't understand. It used to be called the scientific method. Woot! So, would it not make more sense when a person dies to keep the process going of learning and growth in the spirit world? I guess the answer could be yes, if you believe that being spirits is what humans are supposed to be. That is, if you believe that flesh, the body, the material world, is not the intention of our Creator, but just kind of a beginning point. Now that is a huge presumption or starting point. So like if you were making a geometric proof and you just threw that sucker in there, it doesn't stand on its own. Like you'd need to prove that in another proof first before you bring it in. Does God want humans to be spirits, or does he want them to be flesh? And so far as Christianity is concerned, God does not want us to be spirits. He wants us to be flesh inhabited by the Spirit which he gives. And so no, it does not make any more sense to use death to send us to a place where we no longer are who he wants us to be. From a Christian perspective, especially when kind of the foundation of the Christian idea is that this death that rips apart the soul and the spirit is a punishment, a curse which God placed upon the world for the initial rebellion of humanity against him, against his will, against his being God. So if that is true, to think that then we could use this death to get closer to him is really kind of arrogant. It's like falling on the ground and scraping your face, so it's like all bloody and bleeding, and rather than going and putting Neosporin on it or something, intentionally getting it scarred because you're going to convince the world that it's really beautiful after all. You can try, it ain't going to work. So now jumping back from that to another assumption or presumption, a starting point that would need to be proved. Why would God give man free will to learn and grow infinitely and then decide to judge man after a short life on earth? Well, did God give man free will? And if he did, was the purpose of free will to grow infinitely? Those are assumptions. Those are assertions that don't just stand on their own. I mean, they need to be proven. Scripture actually counteracts both of them to some extent. If we were initially created with free will in order to learn and grow infinitely in the Garden of Eden, we lost that. We threw it away when we rebelled against God. Now, to be sure, mankind still has enough of a will that you can do what you want. In fact, you can do anything you want except be righteous, be good, be holy, do the right thing from a non-selfish motive. Pretty much impossible. Mankind in the fall bound himself not to goodness but to evil through his knowledge of it that he learned by disobeying God. And so now he cannot grow infinitely, even though maybe that's what he was initially supposed to do. Quite the opposite. Death is proof that we stop growing, and once we stop growing, we rot. It's kind of nasty, and we're not free to stop it. So again, here's your assumptive proposition that I would have to debate that to begin with. We're not created free now. That is, as the creation is sustained and the seed of Adam continued to be begotten in the world from his seed, our wills are bound to sin. That is, to arrogant presumptiveness and the desire to be God, which ends up hurting people. And we can do anything but learn and grow infinitely. In fact, we decline quite regularly. And God doesn't just judge us after this life then, but he's already judged us. That's why we're dying. That's the judgment. That's like the hint. Hey, you guys, you're bad. I'm killing you, right? Now, Jesus came and said, oh, by the way, since I've defeated this death, since I've overcome it all through my own suffering and resurrection, there is another judgment yet to come beyond this death, from which, if you're attached to me, you will no longer receive, because you have passed over from death to life in my flesh and blood. But if you reject me, the only guy to ever, achieve this kind of super transcendence in history, and the only one who ever will, if you don't want to be part of him, then you have no hope. Then you're going to face the judgment, and you'll just get to stand based on how good or evil you are. And if you think that's good news, then you're just lying to yourself. Many people are nice, but none of us are selfless. Seems no need to do that. Yeah, the judgment is very much necessary because evil needs to be gotten rid of. That's the purpose of the judgment, to remove evil from creation forever so that it no longer bothers anybody again. Very much a need for that. And if you decide, I'd rather be evil than good because I'd rather be myself than be a son of God, well, then that's your choice. Yeah, see ya. I'm not happy about it, but I'm not gonna hate you for it. But it's completely logical. It makes lots of sense. So then why judge an infant and send most to eternal damnation when we are just learning what is happening? No, we are refusing to learn what is happening. If you learned what is happening, you would receive the proclamation, which comes with the Holy Spirit, striving with divine power to convert you to it, to know that death is God's punishment against you for your sin, which you did, yes, inherit from Adam, and that this is because you're at root a bad person. But the that Jesus is God's answer, that he prefers mercy to justice, and so he judged your evil in Jesus on the cross first, and now imputes to you Christ's righteousness so that you will stand. The fact that most reject this, and that even infants are born with it, well, that really has nothing to do with learning what is happening. We are born with this sin because we inherit it. You get your genes from your pop and your mom, right? And it's in your nature to reject it, but the Spirit's working to convert you. So if you reject it, then it really is just on you. It's not like you didn't exercise your will to reject God. So in that sense, from a Christian point of view, no, nothing of what you write would make more sense. It would not make more sense for God to let his broken, cursed creation bear that curse unto death and become spirits in perdition and just leave them there, continuing to learn and grow and fester in their pursuit of spiritual evil down to the depths of kind of eternal torment. No, God loved you so much that he sent his son Jesus Christ to save you from it, and he is God's answer to us. He wants to take us out of that perdition spirit prison, free the captives, lead us in his train, give us our bodies back just as his body came back alive from death, and keep us then learning and growing in a bound to goodness will for the rest of eternity in a paradise, a world like this but without all the evil. Yar? Hey, good question. You know? Yeah, really. I mean, I'm glad to talk about it.
Amen.
All right, that's almost all the time we got for, but one more quick question. I happened to be blessed to be interviewed by Issues Etc. just the other day, talking about superheroes and story and redemption and cool kind of stuff, and I happened to mention that I'd seen X-Men First Class last weekend. Sweet movie. If you're an X-Men fan. And if you're not an X-Men fan, go see Thor instead. But, got a question about it. I emailed this question. It's very important to me and troubling, so I decided to ask it publicly. When you said that the new X-Men movie was the best one since X-Men 2, did you take into account Wolverine? Signed N. Now that's a great question, because is Wolverine technically an X-Men movie, or is it a spin-off movie? Now, I really enjoyed Wolverine. I thought it was a great movie, but I also spoke with some friends who were big X-Men fans that they didn't like it. It didn't quite do it for them. There was something missing from it. They weren't able to convince me of this fact, but that was the way they felt. So, well, let's back up here. Let me break it down. Now, without question, X-Men 3, Rise of the Phoenix, or whatever they called it, was by far one of the worst films in the history of the world with good content. The second Star Wars trilogy, I mean, it ruined good content worse. But it was, you know, it's comparable almost. X-Men 1 was pretty good. It's kind of a good movie, but it didn't just have the kick. X-Men 2 was one of the greatest comic superhero movies of all time. Just start to finish, a good film. Wolverine was a good film too. It was easy to watch. It told the story. You get a great character, a great actor. See the rise of Sabretooth, and then you have Weapon X, kind of a little shift from the classic lore, but, you know, it was cool. And then now you have X-Men First Class taking you back in the timeline to the beginning, and I think this is part of setting up a little bit of a reboot, kind of because X-Men 3, you know, ruined everything. I mean, when you when you do a third movie that brings back to life the person who died at the end of the second movie, only in order to kill her again at the end of the third movie, I mean, your plot line is just not doing too well. So, to answer your question, was X-Men First Class better than Wolverine? I think so. Not only because it has Wolverine in it, like this much, but because if I were to sit down with my wife, who can withstand comic book movies, but doesn't like them, I had to show her either Wolverine or X-Men First Class, which one would stand alone by itself and convince me it was worth watching. Wolverine is far more eclectic. I mean, you gotta really like and understand Wolverine to enjoy that movie. Now, certainly X-Men First Class is also slightly eclectic. If you're not a fan of X-Men or comic books, it's probably not the movie for you, but it is more standalone-ish than Wolverine is, and that way it's a better film. For just sheer entertainment value, they both do very well, although, I mean, there's nothing like seeing Magneto wearing an X-Men outfit. I mean, how do you rival that? And the acting's great, the writing's great, yeah. But now, see, if I were to throw in Thor to this sucker with the waifu-meter, I'd say go see Thor, because Thor absolutely stands alone, and you don't have to know any lore to really get anything out of it. But which was the best movie if you're a comic book aficionado? First Class, and hopefully it's a sign of the things to come, because man, oh, it was sweet. Oh, did I mention Kevin Bacon? Ching, rock on.
At first I was afraid, I was petrified. I kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. But then spent oh so many nights just thinking how you don't wrong. And I was strong. I knew how to get alone, and so you're back from outer space. I just wanted to mind you without that
tool. Just turn around now, you're not welcome anymore. When you're the one who tried to break